Welcome, Algebra Lab students. Today you are going to be working on a cumulative review over just a lot of different things that we've been working on. I think you've got maybe 15 questions on your cumulative review today. And so what I want to do in this video is just kind of remind you of a couple of problems that I saw in there that maybe had been a while since we've talked about. And so I just wanted to kind of remind you of a few things. Here is one of the problems. I think this may be like question number 3. Don't forget on a problem like this that you want to cross multiply. And so you're going to take and you're going to multiply the x and the 5 together, and you're going to multiply the x plus 2 and the 3 together to create a new equation. And so when you multiply the x plus 2 times 3, remember that's the distributive property, 3 times x plus 2. And when you multiply the x times the 5, that's 5 times x. Once it's written in this form, I think most of you know how to solve this problem. But real quick, you would get rid of your parentheses. You would move the x's to one side, the numbers to the other, and then you would divide. And so that should be your answer on this particular problem. Your problem isn't going to be exactly like this. It's going to change, but that's the technique you want to use on that problem. So don't forget about cross multiplying. Here's another problem that I know some of you are going to forget how to do because you always forget how to find the intercepts. Don't forget that, or remember now, that to find an intercept, you make the other number equal to 0. So on this first one, we're trying to find the x-intercepts. Remember, what that means is we're going to make the other number, since we're trying to find the x, we're going to make the other thing, the y, 0. So this equation is, for the x-intercept, it's going to be something comma 0. And so we put a 0 where the y is at, and now we solve that equation. So what do you get when you solve this equation 0 equals 2x minus 6? Okay, well, you get x equals 3, and so therefore x-intercept is 3 comma 0. So up here we put 3 comma 0. For the y-intercept, this has been up here the whole time. So again, we're trying to find the y-intercept, so you would make the x equal to 0. Instead of make x equal to 0, you would just get y equals negative 6, so our y-intercept would be 0, negative 6. You also know that because this equation is in slope-intercept form, and so that negative 6 is the y-intercept. However, the 2 is the slope. It is not the x-intercept, and that's where some of you make your mistakes on problems like that. So hopefully you'll remember that when you're working on your cumulative review today. Another problem that it's been a while since we've really spent a whole lot of time. I think the last time we did a cumulative review, I did a problem like this too, but this tells you to factor. And this is going to be really important when you go to Algebra 2 next year, that you remember how to factor. And so with 3 terms, remember the way you factor is you make an x and you make a chart. And so we need to fill these things in to start with. So remember, the x squared goes in the middle part of our chart. The 8, it goes down here in the bottom part of our chart. Then the 9x we're going to put in the middle of the x. And then at the top, remember, you multiply the x squared and the 8 together. And so that would be 8x squared up at the top. We're going to fill in these other 2 boxes on our chart with what we put on the x here. So remember, we're looking for something that will multiply to give you 9 and add to give you 8. So what could you multiply to get 8 and add to give you 9? So think about what you can multiply to get 8. It's either 1 and 8 or 2 and 4. Well, 2 and 4 doesn't give you 9, but 1 and 8 does. And so we're going to put a 1x and an 8x on either side of our x here, which means that's also going to be what we put down here in our chart. It doesn't really matter which one goes in which box. Okay, now that we've got our chart filled in, we start looking for greatest common factors. So on this first row going across, x squared and 8x, what do they have in common? Well, they both have an x, and so we would put an x out here. Oh, I forgot. First thing we want to do is make sure we get the right signs on here. And so remember, since that's a positive 8x and a positive 1, these are going to be plus signs out here on our chart. Okay, so now again, that's going to be an x. That's our greatest common factor between x squared and 8x. Okay, now we can look at x squared and 1x, and we could also find the greatest common factor, which is an x. Or we could think x times x gives us x squared. Okay, in this last column, we're looking for a greatest common factor. So what's the greatest common factor between 8x and 8? Well, it would be 8, and so we would put an 8 in that box. And finally, in our last row going across here, 1x and 8 have a greatest common factor of 1, and so that's going to be a 1 that goes right there. And so that's how we fill out our chart. Hopefully you remember doing that, and then that means our answer is just going to be x plus 1 and x plus 8. Or the other way around, x plus 8 and x plus what? So factoring means to use this x in this chart. It's been a while since we've done that, so hopefully that kind of spurs your memory a little bit. Okay, and then I think maybe this is the last question on your cumulative review. It's toward the ends. It's asking you to solve this quadratic equation. So remember, a quadratic equation we can't solve by just getting the x's on one side and the numbers on the other, because we have this x squared piece. And so what we talked about was this formula that you can use called the quadratic formula, and it involves 3 pieces: negative b, b squared minus 4ac, and 2a. And remember, a, b, and c correspond to numbers in this problem. A is always the number in front of the x squared, b is always the number in front of the x, c is always the other number. So in this case, a is 1, b is -9, c is 8. Now we're going to find the values for these three pieces. So what would your value for negative b be in this problem? Well, since b is -9, negative b is going to be +9. Okay, now we need to figure out b squared minus 4a squared, or b squared minus 4ac. And so what do you get for b squared minus 4ac? Well, you're going to take -9 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8. That should give you 49. Okay, remember the negative goes inside the parentheses. And then finally, for 2a, what would you use? Okay, that's going to be 2. 2 times 1. So now we put this together using the quadratic formula. It's the first piece plus the square root of the second piece divided by the third piece. And then the same thing with the minus sign. So we're going to do 9 plus the square root of 49 divided by 2, and 9 minus the square root of 49 divided by 2. The square root of 49 is just 7. So this first one would be 9 plus 7 divided by 2, which equals 8. And the second one would be 9 minus 7 divided by 2, which equals 1. So our answer would be 8 and 1 on that problem. If we replace the x's with 8s, we get 0. If we replace the x's with 1s, we get 0. And so we've found the solutions for that quadratic formula, or quadratic equation. All right, so those are just 4 of the problems that you have on your cumulative review, but there are 4 that I thought you might have some problems remembering how to do. If you have any others that you come across that you don't know what to do on, make sure you send me an email or message me through Canvas, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can to help you with those. But as far as our video goes for today, that's all we've got, folks.